My sister-in-law slapped me across the face at my own anniversary dinner. Not in private. Not during an argument in another room. She did it in front of my 2 children, my husband, his mother, and 3 other relatives who had spent the entire evening pretending not to notice how badly his family treated me. The reason? I had served myself dinner before she had. Her hand was still raised when she said, "You really have forgotten your place in this family." For a few seconds, I couldn't hear anything except the ringing in my ears. My daughter, Lily, dropped her fork. My 5-year-old son, Mason, stared at me with enormous, frightened eyes, and my husband, Everett, looked down at his plate. He didn't defend me. He didn't even tell his sister to stop. That was the moment I understood something I had spent 11 years refusing to admit. My marriage had not been destroyed by one terrible woman. It had been destroyed by the man who kept allowing that woman to hurt me. I slowly put down my fork. I picked up the linen napkin I had ironed myself that morning. I wiped my mouth. Then I looked directly at my sister-in-law, and I slapped her back. The room exploded into shocked silence. She grabbed her cheek. "You don't," I said. My voice was surprisingly calm. Then I turned toward my husband. Everett, a husband who watches his wife get humiliated in front of her children and says nothing, has already chosen a side. He finally looked at me. His face was pale. I reached for Lily's hand, then Mason's. "We're leaving." Neither child argued. They followed me out of the dining room. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't change my dress. I didn't even take off the earrings I'd bought for our anniversary. I simply walked out of the house I had spent years paying for and drove straight to my parents' home. At the time, I didn't know that 2 years later, Everett's family would desperately wish they had never taught me to remember my place, because they were about to discover something they had completely forgotten. The woman they had spent 11 years treating like an outsider was the one person holding their entire financial situation together. My name is Clara Whitmore, and this is how I finally walked away. 11 years earlier, I had met Everett in the most ordinary place imaginable, a tiny coffee shop near the university. I was 23, finishing my degree in interior architecture and running late for class. He was sitting at the table beside mine with an old laptop, a sketchbook, and a cup of coffee he had apparently forgotten to drink. I accidentally knocked my bag into his chair. His coffee tipped over. It spilled directly onto his sketches. I froze. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." He looked at the ruined papers, then at me, then he laughed. Actually laughed. "I've been trying to improve those drawings for 3 months, he said. "You just accomplished it in 3 seconds. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. That was Everett. At least that was the Everett I married. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He wasn't particularly impressive on paper. He was an assistant architect at a small firm, drove an old sedan with a cracked windshield, and rented a 1-bedroom apartment where the kitchen light flickered whenever the washing machine ran. I loved him for exactly that. With him, I didn't feel like my father's daughter. I didn't feel like I came from money. I didn't feel like everyone was calculating what my family could do for them. I was just Clara. He made me feel chosen. My father didn't trust him at first. My mother was more diplomatic. She simply asked me one evening, "Are you sure he loves you, or does he love the life he thinks he can have with you?" I remember getting angry. "Mom, not everyone thinks about money the way you do." She looked at me for a long moment. "I hope you're right." I was certain she was wrong. I was 23. I thought certainty was the same thing as wisdom. We married a year later in a small garden ceremony. My parents helped with the wedding. Everett's family attended. His mother, Lorraine, was polite. His older sister, Meredith, was less so. She barely spoke to me during the reception. I assumed she was shy. I was wrong. Meredith wasn't shy. She was watching. She was measuring me. And somewhere in her mind, she had already decided that I didn't belong. At first, the comments were small, almost harmless. The first Thanksgiving after our wedding, I spent 6 hours cooking. I made everything myself because Everett had told me his mother loved traditional family dinners. When I placed the turkey on the table, Meredith smiled. "Well," she said, "at least someone is trying to learn how this family does things." Everyone laughed. I looked at Everett. He was carving the turkey. He didn't hear it. Or pretended not to. I smiled and kept serving. A year later, after our daughter was born, Lorraine came to visit. She stood in the nursery and looked around at the expensive furniture my parents had given us. "This is beautiful," she said. Then she touched the crib. "Money certainly makes motherhood easier, doesn't it?" I stared at her. She smiled. "Don't worry, dear. You'll learn what really matters eventually. I didn't answer, because I was beginning to learn something else. Every time Everett's family said something cruel, he became very quiet. Not angry, not defensive. Quiet, and his silence became the invisible shield protecting them from consequences. I tried to explain it away. He doesn't like confrontation. He doesn't want family drama. He'll talk to them later. He's just tired. I created excuses faster than they could create insults, because I loved him, and because admitting the truth would have meant admitting that the man I married wasn't protecting the woman he promised to protect. Our son, Mason, was born 3 years later. By then, I had started my own interior design company. It began with 1 small office and 2 clients. Then 5. Then 12. Within a few years, the company was doing extremely well. I never made Everett feel inferior because of it. His architecture career was slower. He struggled to make partner. I paid more of the bills, then most of them. Eventually, I was covering the mortgage, renovations, school expenses, and several family emergencies. I didn't complain. That was my mistake. People learn what they can expect from you by what you allow them to expect. And Everett's family learned that I would always give. The worst of it was Meredith. She owned a small event planning company. At least that was what she called it. In reality, it was barely surviving. Whenever she needed money, Everett found a reason to help. It's temporary. She'll pay it back. It's family. I believed him, until I discovered how much temporary had become. But that came later. Much later. For years, I simply watched money disappear, and watched Everett remain silent. There were dozens of moments I could have left. I didn't. Once at a family barbecue, Meredith looked at my car and laughed. Must be nice having Daddy's money. I had bought that car myself. Everett heard her. He said nothing. Another time, Lorraine criticized the way I dressed. You don't need to look so expensive all the time. I was wearing a simple blouse and jeans. Again, Everett said nothing. Then came the night I finally stopped making excuses. Our 11th wedding anniversary. I wanted it to be special. Not extravagant. Just special. I wanted one evening where we could remember who we had been before everyone else had become part of our marriage. I spent 3 days preparing. I ordered fresh flowers. I made roast chicken with herbs. I prepared a wild rice dish my mother had taught me. I baked a chocolate cake from scratch. I ironed the tablecloth. I polished the silverware. I even found an old photograph from our first year of marriage and placed it beside Everett's plate. In the picture, we were standing in front of our first apartment. We were young, broke, happy. I looked at that photograph for a long time. I wondered where those 2 people had gone. Then Everett came downstairs. His mother and Meredith arrived 20 minutes later. I should have known. The moment Meredith walked through the door, she looked around as if she were inspecting a hotel. She touched the flowers. Real ones? Yes. How wasteful. I smiled. Happy anniversary to you too. She didn't smile back. Dinner began. I served Lily first, then Mason, then everyone else. Finally, I sat down. For once, I was hungry. I had barely taken my first bite when Meredith reached across the table. Her palm struck my face. Everything stopped. My daughter gasped. My son froze. My husband looked at his plate, and Meredith said the words that ended my marriage. You forget your place in this family. I touched my cheek. It was burning. But the pain wasn't what broke me. It was Everett's silence. 11 years of silence. 11 years of choosing comfort over courage. 11 years of asking me to understand. I looked at him, and something inside me finally became quiet. Not broken. Quiet. I picked up my napkin, wiped my hands, and stood. Meredith looked almost pleased. She expected me to cry. She expected me to apologize. She expected the same woman who had swallowed every insult for 11 years to swallow this one too. Instead, I slapped her. Hard. Then I turned to Everett. You had 11 years to choose me. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I shook my head. No more. I took my children's hands and walked away. Behind me, I heard Lorraine shouting my name. I heard Meredith screaming that I was insane. And finally, I heard Everett say the first sentence he should have said 11 years earlier. Clara, wait. I didn't. That night, my mother opened the front door before I knocked. She took one look at my face, then at the children. And she didn't ask for an explanation. She simply stepped aside. Come inside. I walked in. For the first time in 11 years, I didn't feel like I was abandoning my family. I felt like I was finally coming home. 3 days later, Everett called. He apologized. He said his family would make things right. He said Meredith was emotional. He said his mother was upset. He said the children needed their father. Then he said the sentence that made my decision permanent. Can you please just come home so we can handle this as a family? I closed my eyes. Everett, I said quietly, I have been handling your family for 11 years. Silence. And who was handling me? He had no answer. Neither of us knew it yet. But while I was sitting on my mother's porch deciding whether my marriage could be saved, my attorney was about to uncover something that would change everything. Because the money Meredith had been borrowing wasn't coming from Everett. It was coming from me. And someone had been secretly trying to take something much bigger than money. My house. The first week after I left my husband was strangely quiet. No family dinners. No carefully chosen words. No pretending that Meredith's insults hadn't happened. No waiting for Everett to decide whether defending me was worth the discomfort it might cause him. Just me, my 2 children, and my parents' guest wing. At first, the silence felt unbearable. Then it started feeling peaceful. Lily stopped asking whether we were going back. Mason stopped waking up crying. And I realized how tense both of my children had been for years without me noticing. They had learned to watch people's faces before speaking. They had learned when Grandma Lorraine was in a bad mood. They had learned that Aunt Meredith's jokes weren't really jokes. That realization hurt more than the slap. Because I had spent years telling myself I was protecting them by keeping the family together. Maybe I had been teaching them that love meant staying quiet while someone hurt you. I refused to pass that lesson on. 11 days after the anniversary dinner, I filed for divorce. Everett received the papers at his office. He called me less than 20 minutes later. You're really doing this? Yes. Clara, we can work through one bad night. It wasn't one night. He went silent. I continued. It was 11 years. He tried to argue. He said Meredith had gone too far. He said his mother was embarrassed. He said he was willing to set boundaries now. I almost laughed. Now? Yes. After I left? I didn't understand how serious it had become. You understood every time I looked at you waiting for you to say something. He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. My attorney, Malcolm Reed, had handled several business matters for my father. He was calm, methodical, and almost impossible to intimidate. I told him I wanted 3 things: primary custody of my children, the house, and a complete accounting of our finances. He nodded. We'll request everything. I hesitated. There is something else. What? I think my husband has been giving money to his sister. Malcolm looked up. How much? I don't know. Then we'll find out. I didn't expect the answer to be nearly $60,000. The first financial report arrived 2 weeks later. I sat in Malcolm's office while he turned pages. Finally, he pushed one document toward me. These are transfers from your joint account. I looked at the dates. Small amounts, T200, T400, $3,000, T750, sometimes only a few $100s. They stretched across nearly 4 years. I recognized the account immediately. It was the account my design company paid into. The account Everett had gradually taken over managing because I was traveling so often. Where did it go? Malcolm tapped the recipient information. Meredith's company. My stomach dropped. How much? He turned another page. Approximately $58,000 so far. I stared at him. She told everyone her business was successful. It wasn't. I looked down at the pages. Did Everett know? Malcolm didn't answer immediately. That was enough. Of course he knew. Maybe he didn't know every transfer. Maybe he didn't know every amount. But he knew enough. He had been helping his sister with money that wasn't his. Money I had earned. Money meant for our household. Money I had trusted him to manage. I drove back to my parents' house without speaking. My father was sitting in the living room when I arrived. He looked at my face. What's wrong? I handed him the folder. He read the first few pages. His jaw tightened. Clara, I know. No, you don't. He looked at me. This isn't just family interference anymore. I knew exactly what he meant. It wasn't simply a difficult mother-in-law. It wasn't a rude sister. It wasn't a husband who hated confrontation. This was financial betrayal. And it was only the beginning. 3 days later, Malcolm called me. There's another document. His voice sounded different. More serious. What kind? A property transfer. I sat down. What property? Your house. My heart stopped. What about it? Someone attempted to transfer a 10% ownership interest to Lorraine. I couldn't breathe. That can't be right. I thought you should see it in person. I drove to his office. He placed the document on the table. My name was printed at the bottom. My signature appeared beneath it. I stared at it. I didn't sign this. I know. How? Because we have your genuine signature from the mortgage documents. He placed the 2 pages side by side. They looked almost identical. Almost. But the forensic examiner Malcolm had hired noticed tiny differences. The pressure of the pen, the hesitation before certain letters, the way the signature lifted from the page. It wasn't mine. Someone had forged it. I felt sick. Did it go through? No. I looked up. What? The county recorder's office flagged the transfer before completing it. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But someone tried. Yes. Who submitted it? That is what we're investigating. For the first time, I felt genuinely afraid. Not because they could take the house, not because of the money, because someone had been planning this, quietly, for months, maybe longer. Malcolm explained that the investigation wouldn't happen overnight. The recorder's office had to provide its internal records. The notary who witnessed the document would need to be interviewed. Bank records would need to be examined. If the evidence supported fraud, the case could eventually be referred to the Financial Crimes Unit. How long? He looked at me carefully. Potentially years. I laughed bitterly. Years? Criminal investigations move slowly. I looked at the forged signature. I don't want to spend years fighting these people. You may not have to. But if they did this once, he nodded. They may have done it before. That sentence stayed with me, and it turned out he was right. Malcolm searched the county records. 2 days later, he called again. Clara, I found something. What? Your mother-in-law was involved in a similar property dispute 26 years ago. I closed my eyes. What happened? Very similar circumstances. Another family property. Another disputed transfer. Another signature questioned. The case had eventually settled privately. Nobody had gone to jail. Nobody had talked about it. Lorraine had simply moved on. Until now, I sat on my mother's kitchen floor that evening while Lily colored beside me. My mother found me there. What happened? I told her everything. She sat beside me. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she said something I would remember for the rest of my life. Your marriage didn't fail because you finally stood up. I looked at her. It failed because you were forced to stand up alone. I started crying. Not the quiet tears I'd shed in the guest room. Not the tears I'd hidden from my children. I cried the way people cry when someone finally gives a name to the pain they've been carrying. Meanwhile, Everett was discovering that divorce had consequences he had never imagined. His family had expected me to come back. They were wrong. Meredith called me first. You're destroying this family. I almost didn't recognize her voice. This was the same woman who had slapped me across the table. Now she sounded frightened. You did that yourself. You're really going to involve lawyers? You tried to take my house. I didn't. Then why was your name on the transfer paperwork? Silence. I knew then. She knew. Maybe she hadn't personally signed it. But she knew something. Clara, please. No. You don't understand what this will do to Mom. I laughed. What about what your family did to me? She hung up. Everett called afterward. He sounded exhausted. Please don't turn this into a criminal case. I stared at the phone. Did you know? Know what? The property transfer. Silence. Everett. I knew Mom wanted security. My chest tightened. Security? She thought you were going to take everything. Everything? The house. The business. The kids. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So your solution was to secretly give her part of my house? I never signed anything. But you knew. I didn't think she'd actually do it. That sentence was almost worse than an admission, because he knew enough to be suspicious, and still did nothing. Just like always. The difference was that this time, his silence couldn't protect him. I ended the call. That night, I tucked my children into bed. Lily reached for my hand. Mommy? Yes? Are we staying here? I looked at her. Yes. She smiled. Good. Then she closed her eyes. I sat beside her for a long time. For the first time, I wasn't trying to figure out how to save my marriage. I was figuring out how to save my children from believing that this was what marriage was supposed to look like. And while I was doing that, someone unexpected contacted Malcolm. Her name was Tessa. She had worked for Meredith's event company for almost 2 years. She had quit after going unpaid for nearly a month, and she had kept copies of old invoices, including invoices connected to my own family, invoices that suggested Meredith had been quietly adding charges to events and redirecting part of the money elsewhere. Malcolm called me that evening. We may have found the missing piece. I sat up straight. What piece? Proof that this wasn't simply Meredith borrowing money from you. What is it? It's evidence that she had been manipulating invoices for years. My stomach twisted. And my anniversary dinner? He paused. There's an invoice for that too. I stared at the wall. How much did she overcharge me? Not much. That isn't what I asked. He sighed. About $3,000. $3,000. On top of everything else. The money wasn't the important part. It was the realization that even the dinner, where my marriage finally ended, had been touched by the same family's deception. They hadn't simply humiliated me at my own table. They had been making money from that table too, and suddenly I understood something. The slap wasn't the beginning of my story. It was the moment I finally stopped ignoring the rest of it. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else. For a few seconds, I forgot everything. I heard birds outside my parents' house, the quiet hum of the heating system, Mason breathing softly in the room across the hall. Then I remembered. The anniversary dinner, the slap, Everett's silence, the divorce papers, the money, the forged signature, and now the invoices. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. For 11 years, I had thought my biggest mistake was staying too long. Now I realized there was another one. I had trusted people simply because I loved them, and I had confused trust with blindness. At breakfast, my father was already reading the newspaper. He looked up. Did you sleep? A little. He folded the paper. Your attorney called. I frowned. When? Early this morning. That wasn't a good sign. I called Malcolm immediately. He answered on the second ring. We found something else. I closed my eyes. Of course we did. This one concerns your husband. My stomach tightened. What did Everett do? He opened a separate account. I stared at the kitchen wall. When? About 3 years ago. Why? That is what we're trying to determine. He explained that Everett had been transferring small amounts into the account every month. Nothing dramatic. A few $100s here, a few hundred there. But over 3 years, the balance had grown significantly. Where did the money come from? Your household account. I felt the familiar coldness spread through my chest. Did he give it to Meredith? No. Then where? That's the strange part. Malcolm paused. The account is in Everett's name. I sat down. Maybe he was saving money. Possibly. For what? We don't know. That answer bothered me more than anything else, because for the first time, there was something Everett had done that didn't seem connected to his family. It was something he had kept entirely for himself. I asked Malcolm to investigate. He warned me that some records would require additional legal requests. I told him to do it. Then I hung up. My mother was watching me from the other side of the kitchen. What now? I don't know. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then don't decide everything today. That was something I was learning. I didn't have to solve my entire life in one morning. For 11 years, I had lived as though every problem needed to be absorbed immediately. Now I was learning to let problems sit where they belonged, on other people's shoulders, not mine. The divorce proceedings continued. Everett requested joint custody. I expected that. What I didn't expect was the argument his family made. They claimed I was emotionally unstable. They said leaving the anniversary dinner with the children had been impulsive. They suggested I had created an unsafe environment by exposing the children to adult conflict. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. The same people who had humiliated me in front of my children were now claiming I was the one creating instability. Malcolm looked at me. Don't respond emotionally. I know. Let the evidence speak. So I did. School records, medical appointments, teacher communications, calendar entries, receipts, emails, everything I had handled for the children for years. I hadn't kept those things to prove anything. I had simply been their mother. But now the ordinary details of motherhood became evidence. Everett had missed parent-teacher conferences. He had forgotten 2 dentist appointments. He had left school pickups to his mother several times without telling me. And when decisions about the children came up, he had repeatedly asked Lorraine what she thought. The court noticed. Slowly the picture changed. Everett wasn't an absent father. He loved his children. But he had allowed his family to become the third parent in our marriage, and that mattered. One afternoon, Lily came home from school unusually quiet. She put her backpack down. Then she climbed onto the couch beside me. "Mommy?" "Yes?" "Are you and Daddy going to get married again?" My heart broke. "No, sweetheart." "Why?" I took a breath. Sometimes two people love each other, but they don't know how to be good partners. She thought about that. "Did Daddy stop loving you?" I looked at her. "I think your dad loved me, but loving someone isn't enough if you keep hurting them." She nodded slowly. Then she asked the question that destroyed me. "Did Aunt Meredith hurt you?" "Yes." "Because you ate before her?" I swallowed. "No, baby." "Then why?" "Because sometimes adults make cruel choices." She leaned against me. "I don't want to be like that when I'm grown up." I kissed the top of her head. "You won't." And I meant it. Months passed. The divorce became less dramatic and more exhausting. There were meetings, documents, depositions, arguments over property, arguments over money, arguments over things that shouldn't have mattered anymore. Everett occasionally tried to talk to me outside the lawyers. Sometimes he looked like the man I remembered. Other times he looked like a stranger. One evening, he asked if we could talk privately. We met at a quiet cafe. He arrived early. When I walked in, he stood. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You look different." "I feel different." He nodded. "I miss you." I looked down at my coffee. "I miss who you were." His expression changed. "I can still be that man." "No." He looked surprised. "You don't know that." "I do." "How?" "Because that man would have stood up when his sister hit me." He looked away. I continued. "You keep telling me you want another chance, but you still talk about what happened like it was one mistake. It wasn't." "No." He rubbed his hands together. "I was afraid." "Of what?" "My family." I almost smiled. "You were afraid of your mother and sister?" "Yes." "And you weren't afraid of losing me?" He didn't answer. Again, that same silence. I stood. "I think that's your answer." He reached for my hand. I stepped back. Not because I hated him, because I finally respected myself enough to stop pretending. When I got home, Malcolm had sent me an email. The subject line contained only 2 words. "We found it." I called him immediately. "What did you find?" "The separate account." "What about it?" "It wasn't for Everett." I frowned. "Then who?" "His mother." My entire body went still. What? Everett had been moving money into the account and then transferring it to Lorraine. I closed my eyes. "So it was another family account." "Not exactly." "What do you mean?" Malcolm's voice became careful. "Lorraine used the account to pay off debts connected to Meredith's business." I laughed bitterly. "Of course." But then he said something that made me stop laughing. "One of the transfers was made just 2 weeks before your anniversary dinner." "How much?" $20,000. I stared at the wall. $20,000? "Yes." "From where?" "From the account funded by your business." My hands started shaking. That money could have covered school tuition, mortgage payments, employee salaries, anything. Instead, it had gone toward keeping Meredith's failing business alive, and Everett had hidden it from me. For years, I asked Malcolm one question. Did Everett know the money was mine? He knew where the account was funded. That was enough. The man who claimed he had been protecting, his family had been protecting them with my money, but there was still something I didn't understand. Why had Lorraine tried to take part of my house? If she already had access to money, why risk a forgery? Malcolm didn't know either, until the financial crimes detective contacted him. Her name was Nora Bennett. She had been assigned to review the forged property transfer. She wanted to speak with me. I met her at a small government office on a rainy Tuesday. She didn't look dramatic. No movie-style interrogation. Just a woman with a folder and a tired expression. She opened the file. "We've spoken to the notary." "What did she say?" "She remembers the appointment." I leaned forward. "Who brought the document?" "Nobody from your family." My heart skipped. "What?" "The document was delivered through a courier." "Who hired the courier?" "That is what we're tracing." She turned another page. "There is something else." I waited. "The notary says the person who arranged the appointment claimed to be acting on behalf of your husband." My stomach dropped. "Everett?" "We don't know yet." "Did she see him?" "No." "So someone used his name?" "Possibly." I sat back. For the first time, the investigation was pointing toward something bigger than Meredith and Lorraine. Someone had planned this carefully. Someone had wanted the house. And someone had known enough about my marriage to understand that Everett's silence would make the plan easier. Nora closed the folder. We're still investigating. How long? She gave me the same answer Malcolm had given me. Months, possibly longer. I nodded. I was getting used to waiting. That afternoon, I drove home and found Everett standing outside my parents' house. I almost kept driving. Instead, I stopped. He approached the car. Please. I rolled down the window. What? I need to tell you something. I stared at him. About the house? He looked startled. How did you know? Because apparently everyone has been trying to tell me something about my own life. He lowered his eyes. I didn't know about the forged signature. But, he swallowed. I knew Mom wanted the house. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. When? Months ago. And you didn't tell me. I thought she was bluffing. You thought your mother was bluffing about taking my house? Yes. I laughed once. You've spent 11 years assuming other people would stop before they crossed a line. He didn't respond. That was your mistake. His eyes filled with tears. I know. No, Everett. I looked at him. You know now. He nodded. And that's not the same thing. I drove away. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. But the freedom came with a price. The next morning, Malcolm called. The county recorder has released the original submission records. And we have the name of the courier company. Can they tell us who hired them? Yes. I held my breath. Who? Malcolm was silent for a moment. Then he said the name. Everett's business associate. I frowned. Why would his business associate be involved? I don't know. But there's more. What? The courier was paid from an account that doesn't belong to Lorraine. My heart began pounding. Whose account? Malcolm's voice dropped. Your husband's secret account. The room seemed to tilt. Everett hadn't merely known about his family's plans. He had been connected to the person who submitted the document, and suddenly, the question wasn't whether my husband had failed to protect me. The question was whether he had been part of the plan all along.